Okay, 6 o'clock. Now, the only question I had tonight was, do we believe Bruce's fish stories? And, we'll just pass that one by and just say that everyone is here and accounted for, so the roll call. And addition to the agenda, there's one addition.
And that just got missed. It's part of the consent agenda.
We'll get into it, yeah.
Yep.
So, is anyone, it's recommended that we approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion. A second.
Bruce. Thomas seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No public comment tonight. Consent agenda action.
Cheryl, do you want to do bills first?
Yep, I was able to approve the bills and everything looked pretty good. I did notice we got our sewer and lights taken care of, and football area.
The sewer is taken care of, yes. Yep. Sure.
That was a good thing to note.
That's good. Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It came in a little bit over budget than it did, but it was outside of our control. But its project is complete.
And then everything was normal business.
Personnel items, these are our bills to retire or to positions that were resigned last month, and we do have a leave on there as well. From donations, this is the time of year we're going to start our new donation tab. So you're going to see we have a donation from Avon Plastics for $500 for our pop packs, and so we are appreciative of that to start building the pop packs fund. So thank you to Avon Plastics for that donation. And that would be the highlights of the consent
Okay,
agenda.
it's recommended by the superintendent that we approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Rob makes a motion. Seconds, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. That brings us to communication items.
So my superintendent report today, I just want to bring back one item. I'm going to share this in just a second when I start my video, but you had asked a question about how many students we have that are homeschooled. So I added this information to our chart. We have 81 students total that are homeschooled. So when you look at we had, again, just as a recap, we had our 157 students that, resident students that are attending elsewhere, non-resident students that are coming into Paynesville, and then you've got our homeschool kids. So I wanted to bring that information back because I know that was a question of the board. So
I've never seen that before. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yep, you're welcome. And then two, just some ongoing summer work, what's happening. There's professional development work happening over the summer. We are attending, we are reviewing what we are going to be offering, and we're planning kind of some of the upcoming professional development for the course of the year. One of the things that I'm working hard to do is to bring a little bit more of a solid onboarding process or an orientation process for all of our new staff. And so I wanted to share with you just a video that I'm going to be sharing with all of our staff, because I think it really is helpful to just kind of set a tone of how we approach problem solving and things that are happening throughout the district. So I'm going to get this shared, and then I will, oops. So this is about establishing a growth mindset, and then we'll do some different activities around that with all of our new employees. So the onboarding would be for paraprofessionals, food service, teaching staff, kind of all of our staff together as a whole district orientation. So it's relatively short. It's just 8 minutes.
If you operate in the world of sports or education, you've most likely heard of the term growth mindset. It's a concept that's sweeping the world and changing and improving the way that people learn. This powerful idea has been pushed forward by Stanford professor and best-selling author Carol Dweck.
For decades, I've been studying why some people succeed while people who are equally talented do not. And over the years, I've discovered that people's mindsets play a crucial role in this process.
These mindsets are really important when it comes to learning. Her work has uncovered 2 ways of thinking about skill and development. Some people have what's called a fixed mindset. They believe that skills and intelligence are set and you either have them or you don't. That some people are just naturally good at things while others are not. In short, they believe that you are not in control of your abilities. Other people have what's called a growth mindset, and they believe that skills and intelligence are grown and developed. So people who are good at something are good because they built that ability, and people who aren't are not good because they haven't done the work. In short, they believe that you are in control of your abilities. Really, the core idea here is people with a fixed mindset believe that skills are born. People with a growth mindset believe that skills are built. People with a fixed mindset believe that you can't or don't have to learn and grow. And people with a growth mindset do believe in their capacity to learn and grow. Dweck's work shows that mindsets have a major influence on people's ability to learn, and that people who utilize this growth mindset tend to learn, grow, and achieve more over time than people with a fixed. Growth mindset really creates a solid foundation for great learning. And because of its power, companies, sports teams, and schools from all over the world are implementing this into their culture. Over the years, we've worked with a ton of amazing groups to help instill this within their culture. We're talking Fortune 500 companies, lots of colleges, lots of high schools, and even a few prisons who are working to build growth mindset into their reentry program. What I'm trying to say is this is bigger than one study or one TED Talk. This is a powerful concept that's helping lots of different people in lots of different places. Now, the reason it's so important and powerful is it is the foundation for learning. And if you understand this, no matter what you build on that foundation, it will be more powerful. But to really implement and run with this concept, we need to zoom in and look at the nuts and the bolts of it. We need to talk about what it actually is and how it actually works. Through years of work, Dweck and her team have uncovered sort of the defining characteristics of the two mindsets. This table really illustrates the contrast between the two. The first big characteristic we need to talk about is belief. Again, people with this fixed mindset believe that skills are born and therefore they can't or don't have to learn. People with a growth mindset believe that skills are built, therefore they can learn. The second major characteristic is focus. People in a fixed mindset tend to focus on performance and outcomes and results. In other words, their main focus, their main concern becomes how they look, and more specifically, to not look bad. People with a growth mindset tend to focus more on the process of getting better, of learning and growing. These mindsets and these characteristics have a huge influence on our ability to learn, and now we start to see why. Let's look at like the 4 key ingredients to growth: effort, challenges, mistakes, and feedback. The research shows that when somebody is in a fixed mindset, they look at effort as a negative thing, as something that you do when you're not good enough. They also don't see the value or purpose of putting in effort. They've been shown to back down and avoid challenging situations. They get really discouraged and worked up when they make mistakes. And when somebody with a fixed mindset receives feedback from a parent, a teacher, a coach, or a friend, they get defensive, they take it personally, and they don't see the value or purpose of the feedback. So in other words, people with this fixed mindset actually avoid and shy away from these 4 key ingredients to growth. Dweck and her team have shown that when people enter a growth mindset, they look at effort as a useful thing, as an important part of the learning process. They're actually more likely to embrace challenges and persevere and work through them. They see mistakes as learning opportunities, and when they receive feedback, they actually appreciate it and use it. Now, the fascinating and important part of this table is to connect the dots between these key characteristics of the two mindsets and our actions and behaviors towards learning. Let's look at the fixed mindset side first. They actually shy away from putting in effort because they don't believe that they can change. They give up when they're met with a challenge and things get hard because they don't want to look bad. So in their mind, the challenge becomes a threat, and because they don't believe that they can change. They hate making mistakes and are discouraged by mistakes because if you're making mistakes, you're not looking good. And they don't see the value or purpose of feedback because they don't believe in their capacity to grow. So in one way or the other, every single one of these actions is a byproduct of these characteristics. And the same is true on the growth mindset side. They see the value and purpose of effort because they believe in their capacity to grow. They're more likely to take on a challenge and persevere through it because they believe that they can grow and because they're focused on the opportunity to do that. So they frame a challenge as an opportunity to get better. And by focusing on the process and believing in their capacity to grow, they're more likely to understand how important mistakes are in this process. And when they receive feedback from a parent, teacher, coach, or friend, they're more receptive to this because their focus is on getting better and because they believe that that information can help them grow and they have the capacity to do so. 2 key points with this table. First, you're not just one or the other. This is a spectrum. And in different times, on different days, in different situations, you might be in a growth, while other times you'll slip into a fixed. But now that we understand how it works and we understand the characteristics, you can start to identify where you're at on the spectrum and, more specifically, the cause of that mindset. Is it our beliefs or is it our focus? Second, yes, these actions of learning are great, and they're definitely behaviors that we want. But we have to understand that they come from our mindsets. So to create a great culture for learning, it's about zooming in on beliefs and focus and creating a real growth mindset, which is one of the most important things we can do.
All right, so I think it's really important that as educators, we understand how our students approach learning. And I also think it's important as educators for us to reflect on our own learning and when we have our own challenges. And I think that being cognizant of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is an important place to start. So that's one of the things that I wanted to share that I'm putting into our orientation and our onboarding that will happen in the middle of August for all of our new employees. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk through is just helping all of our new staff kind of define their best. I think one of the things that's important is for whether you are a teacher, whether you are a paraprofessional, whether you're a food service worker, a cook, whatever role there is, helping them to kind of set their goal for what they would aspire to look like and what they want that to be. And then within that first 30 days, what do they want that to look like? So just really trying to have some more purposeful onboarding and orientation for our staff, in addition to just the nuts and bolts of the handbooks, the contracts, where you park, where you eat lunch, all of that kind of stuff, the important stuff, but also just trying to have a little bit of professional development with that onboarding as our new staff are coming on board. I'm also working with our administration on handbook reviews for students, staff, activities, and our pause program. And we are in the heart of building and cleaning and repairs taking place throughout the building. So that's some of the ongoing summer work, and that's what I have for our administrative report today. Any questions?
Any questions? Did we have any, I don't know, do we have any committee reports? Anybody?
No. All of our negotiations meetings have been pushed back. So there have not been any committees that have met prior from our last meeting to this.
Okay, so move on. No old business. So we get to new business. There's reorganization activities. There's several that are kind of just every year. The newspaper, authorization of payment of bills, the census takers, hearing officers for hot lunch, the school banks. Commencement date we did set already, in a sense, set the calendar.
Well, so one of the the communication has gone out. If you recall, when the calendar was set, there were 3 different options that were identified, and a survey was sent to families. And the date that was identified was May 24th at 7 p.m. And then they are still planning to have the car parade at 6 p.m. So that's something that they have. The feedback was solid, that the community, the students, the staff enjoyed that. So that was the plan, to keep that at 6 o'clock with commencement.
Then we have fees, so that all of these can be approved at once, but we want to open it up to questions, especially if you have anything specific about the fees, for instance, or any of the others.
One thing I'll just highlight with the fee structure, the only thing that you're going to notice that's significantly changed is that it does identify that every student receives 1 breakfast and 1 lunch meal at no cost. Fees identified below are for an extra entree or a second meal. We do have to charge if a student would take a whole second meal or a whole second breakfast. We do have to charge the adult price. So that is something that is different. But other than that, the rest of the fees that are identified have remained the same.
And are there any questions?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like, if possible, step through each of these just real quick. Just
Sure
give
can.
an overview of what each of these things are.
So the official newspaper, the district has to have an identified newspaper.
Yep.
And over the years in the past, it's been the Paynesville
Paynesville
Press.
Press, all right.
As far as, and I can look to the other members of the board, I don't think it's ever been discussed as anything different because that's our local newspaper.
All right.
Okay. The authorization of payments for bills. So you'll notice that we often talk about payments of bills at the board meetings, and Cheryl reviews all that information. This is really an authorization so that if something needed to be signed ahead of time so that we could avoid fees or having something that we have the authorization to do so, but it doesn't mean that we bypass the process of traditional approval.
All right.
Okay. Census takers. So this is like our individuals that are identifying the census for the school district. So it's traditionally the community education director and the superintendent's assistant. So those are the 2 individuals that are identified.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing officers have been the board chair and the superintendent. And to be honest, this has never been used. It is a very, very procedural approval, and it's never been.
All right.
Okay.
But it is mandated, right?
Yeah, we do have to have it. Yep. I'm not entirely certain how that's going to change over the course of time with free lunches, if that may evolve, but so more to come on that. Okay. School bank. So last year at this time, the district transitioned to Magnify. You'll remember at this time or a couple months prior at last year, we went out for an RFP for banking services, and it all transitioned to Magnify. So this is our first completed year with Magnify, and the process has been wonderful for us. So the recommendation would be to stick with Magnify Financial. PMA Financial and PMA Securities is the entity that manages our bonds and investments. Okay. So the commencement date we talked about, and the fee schedule I talked about a little bit as well.
Any other questions?
Make a motion, we approval.
I second. Motion, Ron seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The 23-24 organizational items are approved. Now we need to designate an individual with authority. Sounds strong.
Yeah, so the Department of Education has moved to a secure website. And the reason for that is because it used to be that people could just request permissions and they could access things that were private and they shouldn't have had access to. So the Department of Education has transitioned to an individual with educational authority in Iowa. So that's traditionally a school board, a school superintendent. From there, I have to authorize and approve anybody that has access to our information within the school district. So as a, for instance, I have to authorize who does all of our MARS submissions. Not anybody can log in and see who's enrolled here and whose indicators are the various indicators that get submitted to the Department of Education. So I have to approve all those. Similarly, I have to approve anyone that has access to our financial reports and to submit all of our our statement of assurances, and really the official functioning of the school district through the Minnesota Department of Education. Those have to be approved through the Iowa. While I do that for everybody else, I will not get this. The board authorizes me to do so.
So you get the approval then, Janelle, and it's for somebody to take a look at something. You have that authorization. What takes that person out of that?
I do that when they leave.
When they leave. Okay, so as far as employees, but let's say that we have somebody, a third party that's asking for this information, you grant them that because of whatever they're working on, and they're done with that, then do you go back in? Do they notify we're done with the information that we needed? And then are they removed at that time?
Yep. So,
Okay.
so the way that the permissions work is they are authorized for a finite amount of time.
Okay, all
Initially,
right.
it's for 1 year. But then it also, when we have somebody who, we'll use an example of, when our new building principal came on. She was authorized to be our title coordinator, and then we removed the previous
Gotcha.
principal as the title coordinator.
Yep.
Yep. And all of that happens with, and actually Miranda is assigned as a proxy, so she can do some of those on my behalf. The department really recommends that you do that in case something tragic happens. I get hit by a bus on my way to work. Somebody can take over and make assignments that need to happen. So, that's the way that works.
So we'll need a motion to.
Make a motion.
Thomas, second motion. Gerald made a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's approved. Now we go to the FY 25 long-term facility maintenance. I'm gonna read that. You can listen.
Yep, no, that's fine. Yep, that's it. So I'm going to start by coming down to, so the first two documents, the first one is the resource number 1 is literally this same resolution. It's just typed on a document. Okay. The second is the formal official statement of assurance that has to be submitted to the Department of Education after the resolution is signed. So this is just a document to show you what you're assuring. Okay. What you're assuring is going to be in this third document. So let me pull that one up. So really the district has to assure over the course of 10 years how we intend to use our long-term facility maintenance money. So this is a document that our facilities committee has been working through. And really what it is that you'll see different areas of the plan that are categories of eligible use for your long-term facility maintenance money. So you'll notice one of the first things on there is the long-term facility maintenance bond payments. So that is payment that was made for the indoor air quality project that was just completed last year at the elementary building. So that's one of the things that you'll notice is committed over the course of the next 10 years. The 22-23, so that year is done. So what will happen is then in the next year, this column will go away and we'll move into 23-24, and then we'll add a year at the end. Okay. So this document really is a long-term running document that helps to provide a skeletal structure of our upcoming needs. What our facilities committee has done is, so you're going to notice some things that are just standing. For example, painting at the high school and at the elementary. So there's a set amount of budget for painting and updating, whether you do classrooms or hallways and such. Okay. You're going to notice things like steam trap replacement. They've been fine. We don't see that coming up as any need, but it's there because it's an eligible expense. You'll see roof repairs. This is something we've talked about over the course of just ongoing general roof repairs. We allocate just $2,000 for 22-23. You're going to see a big dollar amount put in there in 24-25 because that's when we're anticipating we may have to take on a large roofing project. So this is going to be reviewed again with our facilities committee, and Ken has been working with a couple of different entities to look at, can we do some testing to find out what the moisture content is of the roofs and some of those types of things that would impact and influence if that needs to move 1 year one direction or the other. This could not really be moved up sooner because it does have to be a bidded process. Okay, so it's a sealed bid, and so that's going to be, again, something that takes a little bit more time and planning. But what you'll see is that that has been then in the next 10 years, you see that the district is planning for one large re-roofing project. Okay. Then you're also going to see upkeep of fields. So that's just a general upkeep, the maintenance that's ongoing. That's not talking about renovation. Okay. What you're going to see there is in 23, 24, or sorry, 24, 25, because we are in that 23, 24 year. There's discussion about the softball field update. And now again, the facilities committee has a subgroup that's working on the activities complex. Okay. And the activities is going to take a look at whether the softball field, the track, the football field, how all of those things are going to come together, if it's feasible to do in 1 year, if it's feasible in 5 years, how it's broken apart. But that money is kind of designated into a 1 year call. Okay. That has been moved. I'll be honest with you. When I came on board, I think that was probably in 22, 23, but the district was not in a place to do that at that point in time. Therefore, it has been moved, but you'll see that it is still on the plan over the course of the next 10 years. Okay. You're also going to see the football field lighting fix that was in there as $30,000, and you're gonna that will be updated when the dollar amount is accurate, but it has not been completed yet, so that's why it is not yellow. Okay, but you'll notice then we don't have that in any future upcoming years because our hope is that we don't have the football lights go out in the future. Okay. Health and safety money, you're going to see that there are some ongoing consistent expenses there. We have some of our inspections. We have our AED pads. Those will be, as they come due, we'll have to put those in because we need to maintain them now that we have them, right? But but that's an eligible expense within the long-term facility maintenance money. You are going to see our resource training and solutions fee is paid for out of our long-term facility maintenance money. And you can see that that's an ongoing cost that's spread out over the course of 10 years. And then you'll see when we've had asbestos come through, that budget is in there as well. You'll see our fire alarm and safety. And that's where, again, those are relatively consistent costs. So you're going to see those costs allocated through. Fire alarm panel, what we're finding is there is beeping in the buildings. If you've been walking through the buildings, you're going to hear the fire alarms, the fire panels beeping. And what we're finding is that when those panels have been updated, they are more sensitive and they're picking up the for lack of a better word, stray voltage going through through where the fire alarm wire is laid by the lightings in the ceiling. So we have been troubleshooting and problem solving the most economical way to handle that issue. One of the things that you'll notice is that's going to come down, and we're going to talk a little bit about in this yellow section as future projects. And this is, Gerald, one of the things that you kind of talked about is what is the plan long-term and how does that work? So this is where our facilities committee and our facilities committee members are Bruce and Cheryl and Thomas. So they'll sit down with with Ken and Chris, David, Sassy, myself, and Rick, and we will kind of talk through what are the things that are, and our technology, what are the things that are upcoming that we need to be planning for and mindful of, okay? And then all of those, as they come to a better, I guess, a better prediction of where our budget was. So this has not been reviewed since the legislative session finalized. So that's why some of these are not, we don't have them integrated into certain spots. But what you'll see is that we've talked about things like an LED lighting upgrade. Well, if we do an LED lighting upgrade, we're going to be changing those lights. Would we need to spend the $30,000 to do the fire alarm panel? Because you'd be doing that. So, right, it's coordinating those pieces and bringing that information to the facilities committee together. Okay. So this is the document that kind of outlines some of that ongoing work. You're going to see things in there like, and roof replacement is in there. It was actually in there twice, so I've deleted this one. It's not calculated twice, but it is in there. And it does note that we do need and require sealed bids on that. So the price is really just an estimate. The air handling unit above the elementary cafeteria, Ken is working on that right now because that was something that was not in the budget when the indoor air quality project was completed, but it is an ongoing need. So that's in here as well. Okay. You're going to see the track and softball complex down here as future projects as well. In full transparency, those are moving targets because the price has fluctuated very significantly since that original conversation took place in 2019. Okay. I've had the facility, and you'll notice on the agenda later, there's bolded that the facilities committee and the subcommittee is going to be meeting on the 24th of July. Okay. So this document is our ongoing document, but the plan that is approved is for these areas up in the blue, the blue bars, those are what require MDE approval for the use of the funds. Okay. And that's the document that is in this, when you're making this statement of assurance, that you're using the funds that are allocated through the Minnesota Department of Ed for those eligible expenses. So we're not using that money for other ineligible expenses.
Questions?
Yes, so it's that money's there, so if you, I take it, so you requested a block of money, so you.
We're allocated that money.
Allocated.
It's just allocated.
Okay.
Yep, we don't choose it.
Okay, so it's allocated to us, so if you have underruns, what happens to the underrun of that money?
It carries forward.
Okay, so but then can you move it someplace else, or does it have to stay in that lane?
It has to stay. It
Has
still
to stay in
has,
that lane.
well, it can stay, it has to stay as an eligible long-term facility maintenance. It doesn't
Gotcha.
have to be, if it was, so as a, for instance, the softball field, not all of that could be covered through long-term facility maintenance, right?
Okay.
Because you cannot use that money to build a new building, for example.
Okay,
You can use that money to,
refurbish.
refurbish the existing spaces. You can use it to, there are some new pieces of legislation that came in about making sure that you have bathroom facilities that are gender neutral. So those are some things that were new eligible expenses, but I still can't take that money that's designated as long-term facility maintenance and use it to pay for custodial staff, for example.
Gotcha.
So it has to stay within that eligible category,
All right.
but we don't lose it. We can build it so that we have some long-term planning to complete those projects.
Or, so then the other side of the coin, so you have an overrun. Then what you're saying is that money is sitting there. If you had an underrun someplace else and you have an overrun someplace, whatever that offset is, whatever that delta is, you can pull that money in to pay for that overrun.
As long
The
as,
overrun would come from the general fund. But you can't borrow against your long-term facility units in the future. Does that
Gotcha.
make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's not,
Public money.
So you can't even, so we know like let me just come back to, so we know that in 23-24, we get approximately $370,000.
Mhm.
Okay. We also know that we're going to approximate $370,000 in 24-25. We can't spend in 23-24 in anticipation of 24-25's money. We can underspend in 22-23 and carry it into 23-24. but we can't overspend. And if you overspend, it comes out of your general fund.
I just can't replace next year, like back in your general fund, replace that.
Right. Yep. And there's certain circumstances, some of the things like, as a, for instance, our indoor air quality project, we had to have approved before we could make the expenditures. So there's, even though it was part of our plan, you still have to have the Department of Education approve that it is, because it's a large project.
Gotcha.
Just a couple of things as I watched this. There was a lot of conversation on long-term maintenance fund to try and keep us away from going back to the public to bond all the time. So the way this is set up, they're fine tuning it. But if you look at the annual expenses and you get to, see where I'm at here,
Oh, yeah, there, yep,
get to 24 and 25, they're really big.
Yep.
Basically, I think what the idea of the long-term maintenance fund is to try and break that up. So then if you look at all the annual expenses for all the years past that, you have a lot of money coming in, which means that I'm not sure there are things that'll come up. Well, you gotta have a contractor in here only one time because they're gonna save all this money, or all the prices are gonna go up, which they go up forever anyway. All those kind of things you hear from everybody, but it may mean we do the roof in more parts
Gotcha.
going forward. And then it fits this budget better, keeps us away from going back and asking the public for money. So I think that's the idea, which
it is.
we don't have it refined yet, and Ken's not been aboard long enough to be able to see how we can make that work. If we do a softball park, have a plan, do a softball park in parts. What can we do here? What can we do here? What can we do here? Therefore, we don't have to go back because we have a tech levy that's gonna come up here pretty quick.
Right.
And these numbers don't look good with that. But I don't know, I'm speaking out of turn maybe, but I think we're not refined enough. We just have to have more time to figure it out.
But that's one of the tasks of the facilities committee, now that we know what our final budget dollars were, is to now take a look at what are those priorities? I did have, and since our facilities committee met last time, I was able to have Neil Tessier out to review and update, because the old in 2019, what was done, is significantly under budgeted from what it would cost today. And so that's gonna have to be a discussion within the committee, and that, to Bruce's point, we may have to look at really segmenting that out and then extend that plan of maybe it's $80,000 to redo the fields one summer. Maybe it's building dugouts the next summer. Maybe it's, maybe the reallocate or the repositioning of fields is not a discussion any longer. Those are some of the things, now that we have that updated information, to know, bring that back to that facilities committee to know where to go. Okay.
Just real quick, so, new money starts July 1st, the new fiscal year.
Correct.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Someone like to,
So move.
you have to read the resolution.
So we have the resolution. It's a short one.
Go ahead, Ron, if you're ready. I'm in the wrong.
Got it up in there?
I just about got it here.
There you go, right there.
So you
Motion for the,
will introduce a resolution approving.
Director Brown Spanier introduce the following resolution and move this adoption. Resolution approving school district 741 long-term facility maintenance 10-year plan. Assurance of compliance.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Bruce, roll call.
Bruce.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Michelle. Aye. Rick.
Aye.
Harold.
Aye.
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 Passes. Okay. Supposed to be passed on 11/5/2023. Okay. Okay, strategic plan review.
All right. The strategic plan review. So there's kind of two things that I would like to do here. One is just to walk through, and And again, nothing has changed in this document. So as people are reviewing, it is the same as it has been. Okay. We've talked quite a bit as at the board table about the dates and how those dates have become a little bit fluid. But I do want to walk through what each of those areas are and provide an update on what is happening or has happened along the way for each of the areas of the strategic plan. Okay. I recognize that it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think it's probably advantageous to make sure everybody's just on the same page. So I'm skipping over the summaries because really those are the goals, and we're going to address each of the tasks within the goals, unless you'd like me to walk through the strategic, each goal individually. Okay. So the strategies and tactics. So the first goal for surrounding growth is prioritizing growth as an organization, maximizing student and staff growth on a daily basis. So the first strategy was to provide social and emotional curriculum opportunities in all grade levels at Paynesville area schools. So embed the 7 Mindsets curriculum. So the 7 Mindsets curriculum has been at the elementary for the past, the past 3 years. And it was embedded, it was brought up to the secondary for the last 2, and it's continuing at the secondary. The elementary is transitioning to a character strong, which is similar. It is still a social emotional learning. It is still a social emotional learning curriculum. But that is going to be embedded across the district's K-12, a social emotional learning process and curriculum. Develop an expanded system-wide PBIS support, so positive behavior intervention and supports. So if you think about some of the approvals that have happened, and Cheryl has probably seen some things in the board in bills about PBIS attendance at workshops, that has been scaled up from the elementary. It is integrated into the middle school as year 1 for this year. So last year was the learning year for all the staff to set the goals, and now they're going to roll it forward into the activities at the middle school this year. Okay. Establish intentional time at the secondary and elementary for social emotional learning. So again, that's using the 7 Mindsets or the character strong curriculum. The elementary has been had the instruction in the classrooms where our social worker has gone in. They're looking at different ways to do that next year, whether it's every classroom or if it's, again, a teacher invites that teacher, the social worker in to provide that instruction. But that is happening in every classroom at the elementary where, and at the secondary, it is going to be more grade level specific based on courses. So, but it is intentional and it is specific. And so I feel like that's one of those things that was in that plan. And then you can see as you look at the start date, ideal completion date, and resources, those are, those align with that action steps or the tactics. Any questions on that first strategy?
So the ideal completion date, if we're moving it into the secondary school this year, that ideal completion date is not. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
For
June 2022. So if what you're telling me is, I guess I don't understand the ideal completion date. Does that mean that we've already implemented it all the way across K-12, or what does that mean?
Sure. So when this plan was written in August of 2020,
Yep.
that was the hope, was that would have been implemented by June of 2022.
Gotcha. And I understand it. It sounds great. So is there going to be a statement put in there as to why we didn't meet that June 2022 date? Is it because of COVID? Is it because of something that's pushed that out? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can make a statement about that.
Because if you look at this, you're saying that you're already done with this. K-12 has this already implemented.
So K-12, this is implemented. This is in progress in K-12. So if you come back to the tracker, this has been moved over to implemented. Yep. And I certainly can change it.
But it's not implemented until the 23-24 school.
It's implemented now. It's in there.
They are
now.
doing it. So our staff is going to train, and Well, okay, so
It's not complete yet. I think-
Exactly, that's what it's saying
I think
here.
I-
Ideal
I think
completion date is
ideal
excellent.
completion date, but it says ideal.
ideal.
So that's the first thing. But maybe that should say June 2024 or June 2023. Because when we did it, and we had a couple of things that we did in the strategic plan, that it all sounded really good.
Mhm.
When it hit the system, it wasn't that anybody put brakes on. It didn't work the way we thought it. So we had to coordinate with staff and everybody else to how to make some of these work, which just kind of automatically puts the ideal completion date out.
Oh, and that's on, no, and I totally understand that when you're putting something together, because you want to have a burn-in period, figure out what's working, what's not working, and then you eventually get out there. Even if you set a date out there saying it's done, you may have to move that to the right.
Yeah, and I think in this case, you make a move to another date.
Yep.
But is this something that ever will be done?
Yeah, it's not an
It's gonna be an ongoing thing, so I don't know that you can say in the end that, boy, we did it. No, we're doing it.
I don't think it ever.
Yeah.
But is the 7 mindsets in the high school?
Yeah.
So it's everywhere?
It's been embedded.
It's been in both, the elementary, the social worker and the social worker, dean of students, and there was a core team of individuals that looked at the character strong versus 7 mindsets and
What high
better
school?
fit. 7 mindsets,
So that's already in place.
yes.
Then we should take it off.
I don't think we take it
And
off.
then take it off. So again, it's work that's continually being done. But it's been kind of ideal.
But that's a good point.
Then you're tracking it forever. For what?
You're tracking it forever.
So instead of a completion date, it's an
Well, then it's
implementation,
not-
and implementation means you're doing it forever as well. It's
So, okay, so maybe I just need to understand, what do you envision the purpose of the strategic plan? So when I look at a strategic plan, this is kind of a skeletal structure to guide the work of the administration, the teaching staff, myself, to look at, this is the direction. We wanted to make sure that social emotional learning was happening across the district. The tactics, the start date, the ideal completion date, along with the resources were kind of those, this is how we'd like for it to happen. But the strategy that aligned with the growth goal of the district, that should have been driving some of the work and the decision-making that was happening. In my mind, those things were happening, but I'm hearing that maybe, is that what you're,
Well, I think there's some good points here. Well, so if there's not going to be completed and it's ongoing, what's the difference between educating a 4th grader for ready for 5th grade or a 5th grader to 6th grade? See what I mean? You brought the 7 mindsets in. That was something new. If it's there, maybe it just disappears off of that.
Well, we have, the strategy doesn't, maybe it's the action steps that we're getting stuck on. We have a strategy, then we have the action steps. We have 3 different action steps. And maybe those will change over time.
so when I look at, as we review this strategic plan, there are going to be components of this that are implemented. We are doing, they are ongoing, okay? That doesn't mean that we stop doing them because we've met a date. And it doesn't mean that the district no longer feels that social emotional learning or having a social emotional curriculum is important. It just means, okay, it's here, it's ongoing. As we get further through this plan, we're going to find we may need to bring back the strategic planning process to establish, where do we go next? Are there other areas? And there's going to be things that you're going to see that we have not done yet. And those are going to become focused over the course of the next year, year and a half. The implementation dates do not apply, because to Bruce's point, there have been other things that maybe they didn't roll out in the way that we anticipated they would, so we needed to respond. Those items will still be on the strategic plan, and the board may determine, this strategic plan isn't robust enough anymore. We need to do some planning for additional areas of focus or how we want to grow. as these are now implemented, right? So I think this is going to be part of, we have an established social emotional learning curriculum and an intentional process to make sure that that takes place at the elementary and the secondary, right?
I guess my idea is to eliminate that ideal completion date, because I think we all agree is a plan is never going to be totally completed.
Yeah.
And you've got to develop a plan, but it's always going to be modified to
Right.
some.
But each of these action steps have been already implemented. So they have been completed, but they're ongoing.
Right.
So when does a strategy or a tactic go to the goals? The part that we skipped over.
These are all,
When
this
that- when
is,
that-
no,
when it's working, does it
Yep.
move to goals?
take a look. So underneath this strategy is how we meet this goal. So this growth goal for goal number 1 regarding growth, Paynesville area schools prioritizes growth as an organization, strive to maximize student and staff growth on a daily basis. Growth will be measured through a holistic approach, including but not limited to the following elements: emotional and physical wellness, intellectual wellness, and social wellness. This first strategy is around emotional wellness. Okay? It's also around your social wellness.
So are we better off than on that? Just check this out on our strategic plan as we look at this documentation, not having the start and completion date on this document and keeping that as the strategic plan tracker.
Sure.
Here's our strategy, and you can follow that strategy on the tracker, because otherwise, in that sense, you're updating dates on both ends. Because if we're going to update this,
Yeah, I've not-
tracker and say, oh, well, our tracker's updated, but we just haven't updated this document. So just take that need for update out of this document, saying this is our document that's the words of the actions that we're doing. So as you look at the strategic plan tracker, you can relate that back to this document. And then there's only one list of dates and movement of updating that you have to do on that sense.
No, totally disagree. This here.
So then up here, the strategic plan tracker. We don't need both. We don't need to track on a tracker.
Yeah, you do. But this here is an action item that has to be taken.
Yeah, so it's in our tracker. They're coincided. They are two
Okay.
documents that work together.
Yeah. And that's what you'd have for a strategic plan. This is an action item that has to be, that you have to take a look at. All that action item is telling you is that you're going to start it on this date. And I agree, maybe the wording is a little confusing, and you could put in there ideal implementation date, but then you put in there, this is when we're going to start it, and this is when we're going to have it fully implemented. Your tracking side of it is, okay,
We started it, now we're implementing it.
no, your tracking side of it is, where are you at with that? Okay, so we started on this date. We're looking at something in the future and saying, this is going to be done at this time. And then you start running across those issues. Like Bruce had mentioned, it didn't work the way we wanted it to. So then you start pushing that out to the right of having to understand what has to be done. And there may be other action items based off of this action item here, what was going to happen. There may be additional action items that are going to have to fall under this. So you know exactly where you are at all times as we try to get this thing fully implemented. That's why you have to have both documents with those dates on there. At some time when you get done with that, and you have it that on your tracking side of it that's fully implemented, you're done, and then you can come back here and to put that in there. It's done, and complete this out completely. You're going to continue following. You're absolutely right. All of this stuff here for education has to be there. And that's going to go on until we completely change how we're going to educate students. That's going to always be ongoing. But this is going to be that history of what that action was, what's needed as far as action steps within that when the board decides, or whomever that is decides that it needs to be started, to start working on this process. What an expectation is, like I said, we could change that to an initiation date. And then, or either initiation date or well, yeah, it'd be the start date, but either a implementation date, and then the other stuff. I think this looks great. Whoever put this together, all of that looks great. But then you have to follow it through on the actual tracking, on that spreadsheet to see how far out to the right you're pushing it, or you could be pulling it to the left where it's going great and you're going to implement it a lot quicker than you had anticipated. And that'll be your history of how you did your strategic plan for an action item.
Strategic plan, district, or you put together.
This was, there was.
We're
a-
not paying for this. We had this conversation that we were gonna.
This
This was,
us
yeah.
the board with the previous superintendent initialized this and started.
And we're kind of modifying it.
Well, so that,
We had a whole group of people
yeah,
that
that
got
was
together,
not.
people from the community all over the place. And we brought them into it. And then,
Which is good, but I guess what I'm
Right.
getting here is
So
we're not paying.
No.
Earlier, we had this talk that we were gonna hire somebody and, spend X number of dollars to
No.
develop this
well, what
plan.
we did pay somebody. They,
At the
they-
onset.
At the onset, they came in, kind of coordinated, they spoke as a different party, they weren't with us.
Right. Hired a
That-
consultant for a
That I
one-time
think.
documentation.
Where he was.
Still correct, but as a group and community, I mean, I totally agree, this is never ending. I'm hung up on the completion date, but I think it's always never ending. And I think you have to have it. It's a must.
I think it becomes, how big do you want the document to be? 10 years from now. Probably nobody in 10 years may even remember the embedded 7 mindsets, right?
Well,
So then it'll be something else. Maybe there'll be 9, or maybe there'll be 5. Or
So in
somebody
10
else will
years-
just look.
so Bruce, in 10 years, we may not remember 7 mindsets or character strong, but we should see that our system provides social emotional learning for our students.
Yes, a lot
because
of
that
it
was
is
the
correct in
implementation.
there.
And
Yes,
we're
It's
evolving,
just,
we're evolving.
correct.
yeah, because if you're, to move the 7 mindsets and it's still there, that's maybe not what's accurate here.
Yeah, but I'd hate to lose it. It's part of our history, and if you don't keep it in there someplace, 10 years from now, did we do anything 10 years ago? Yes, we did. This is what we've been doing. There needs to be a history kept someplace.
And I don't-
I'd like to
this-
think it's documented.
This document is not going to last us for 10 years. We are going to have to come back, maintain this and develop another. Because once we get the majority of this done, what direction do we want to continue to lead the district, right? So that's where that will continue to grow, but this document will remain. This will remain. This was the strategic plan. And when I can change the date from up here to say instead of 21, 23, that can be updated to 25 if we need to. But I think it's really having the conversation about what are the things that have been done so far and how would you like me to document that so that you are clear. Is it in one place? Is it in 2 places? How would you like to see this so that it becomes clear as to what's happening? So this is not going to end, but the implementation is complete.
And I think that's the word, like what Gerald just said, that maybe we hung up that word completion. It has not been completed, but it has been implemented. So maybe that word needs to be changed.
I'm just making some notes there.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. Okay,
What's going to drive this is as they look through this, a couple years from now, it'll look like to anybody else that we didn't start it.
Say again?
2020, 2021, and we did all the starting. And I think Gerald has an interesting thing. The more I look at this, is maybe it has to be divided in 2 areas. One that you believe you're somewhat completed. It doesn't go off the schedule, but might go off here, but implement something that we're starting. We're always talking about, we just watched the video today, right? So does that video hit this thing? That doesn't take a whole group of people to come in and decide if they want to look at it. It's pretty common sense. But maybe that's something that we do. But what you're saying, if I'm just, as I listen a little more, is we're just kind of floating. We're progressively making a document older because we're leaving it all on there. on things that could be completed.
Right.
Right, so the strategic plan document that has been like the roadmap has not been modified or changed. That
Hasn't
remains
been
in-
because the dates are different. Some of these
No.
started in 2021.
They were,
Started in 2020. So there's changes that go on in this thing.
those were, I will go back and look at the versions, but Bruce, I don't believe I changed any of the dates. I believe that when the plan was originated,
You were
There were
there in
something-
2021.
I
But
just,
you have some stuff that was started in 2021. I was just
that was when it was
getting down this
predicted.
thing.
That was when it was
Yep.
predicted to start. When we initiated this strategic plan, that's when it was predicted to start.
Mhm.
Not necessarily been updated to start.
And I can look at that, but I believe when the plan was approved by the board, that was kind of the trajectory of kind of the best case scenario of when the district wanted those things to start. Now, what happened between 19 and 23? We've had some significant changes. You've had a change in leadership of the superintendent. You've had a change in board. You've had COVID changes of distance learning, in-person learning, all sorts of, right? There's been lots of movement.
But that goes back a little bit to what Gerald's talking about.
Yep.
Again, I don't mean to make this complicated. Maybe we have to continue at another meeting. But in essence, if we're saying everything we're doing here is what we started in those years, what about what you just said? Should that be on there?
So that's where if I
Should there
take
be
a look
something
at,
new on
that's
that?
where I look at the tracker.
Tracker.
Okay.
That's when we started this, the tracker was what we were gonna look at as what we're starting and what we're implementing. As long as it fit in the strategic plan, the goals of the strategic plan. And the tracker is what we intended to utilize to follow along with those different things that we were gonna be implementing and starting and ideas that we had. The tracker was that moving device. We didn't have the intent to go back to this big document and keep on adjusting those years and to keep on adjusting those things. That was going to be the tracker for this document is there. One thing I would say that probably looking back on the document, if we're going to use the strategic plan document as just a guide, then we shouldn't have any of these plans in there. That should be on a separate planning document for our strategic plan. It should be just the goals listed out, the paragraphs here. This is where we're at, but here is actually everything that we're doing and the wording into that.
Well, this is our method to keep track of it.
Correct.
So this,
Of what we did, what we accomplished.
Yep.
when I
All the
started
tabs in the
reviewing
bottom.
in January, so you'll see, I believe that in January of 2022, January 11th, is when we first started reviewing the tracker, okay? And the conversation at that time was, how are we going to know if we've moved something and it's completed and it's just implemented? And if I recall, some of the board members said, well, but we don't want to lose that of what has been done, okay? So that's where if you look at 322, you're going to see this new box added that are items incorporated and integrated. Those are the things that have been now, okay? They were in planning earlier, or they've moved on, and that's where they are living.
So then let's go back to what you were just talking about. So does the 7 mindsets move to there?
Yes, so if you
We don't
look,
lose track of it, but it's not on this document.
it's not on, it,
And it doesn't change the strategy. It doesn't say, it'll change your action steps.
it's not gonna change the action steps. Those, because that work has, established the 7 mindsets curriculum, that was done. That has happened. So there's no need to revise that.
But it says in this document, action steps. That's, I think, what you're talking about. It says that's an action step. If it's done, does it move to that document and come off of here?
It's been on our tracker since July or January 2020,
Right.
whatever.
And it wasn't done. Now, if it's
an item in
implemented,
implementation.
it is done. I think that's maybe what the question is really.
But it's in implementation. That's what we just talked about earlier. It's in implementation.
It's not implemented yet.
Exactly.
If it's not implemented yet, we just move the date for implemented. But when it's in place.
Okay,
and
so let me
implemented, then it
ask you
moves
this
in our
question.
sheet.
So if we're teaching, if we are incorporating our English language arts standards for the new standards that the state of Minnesota put out, okay, and we're gonna start now we have to follow state standards for our instruction, right? We never stop doing that. So would that live in we're exploring the standards? We're now planning for how those standards incorporate into our current curriculum. We implement that new state standard and then it moves off.
Or does it say we keep up with what the new state standards are? And it stays there. That would be an item that I would think would stay there, maybe not specific. I don't know if I'm kind of trying to.
And you're not wrong, Bruce. Cause that would be something, so if you have new state standards that come down, you really should lay those into some type, somewhere within the strategic plan to have that understanding of, these are things we have to implement. Where are we at with trying to implement those? And it may be something where we're gonna have to go find funding. We're gonna have to, whatever that is, that we're gonna have to pay for something. It might not be, but, so you have that understanding. Hey, this is what it is, you know, that, you know, as far as the strategic plan or the strategy, these are the action items. This, we have to implement. So if it's for this year, we have to implement it August or July of 2023. And the ideal, as far as implementation date will be maybe at the end of the year, because you have to track whether or not, or end of the school year, you have to track whether or not it's actually working. The state says that you have to do it, but are we fulfilling the state requirements? And that's what you have to track.
But is that tracking the strategic plan or is that tracked separately?
Standards and everything.
Yeah, that's tracking standards, that's not a part of our strategic.
Yeah, it is a part of your
Well, but
strategic
you
plan.
have this.
It's part of state standards, it's not an option. Strategic plan are our
Yes, okay.
choices, what we have.
Okay, so let me pause for a minute. There is no current requirement that we have a social emotional learning curriculum. This is something the community, the board, the staff identified. This is something our district needs.
Went just off your example. Your example was the state
Right.
changes their standards. So that would be like another item added on. And it says, keeping up with the state standards,
That's not,
you have something there.
that's something we have to do anyways.
Okay.
That's like
So
saying.
if you have the 7 mindsets working in the system right now, then why should it be there? Because we should just know that. I should just do it.
But we
That's I
didn't
think
have,
what you're talking
the
about.
difference,
You're
Bruce, is
trying
we
to
didn't,
keep
we were
this-
not required to do so. This was something that was a priority of our district in order to make sure that we are prioritizing growth for students' emotional, physical, and intellectual wellness.
So the example of the state standards was not a good example. Is that what you're telling me?
I think it's a perfect example.
Because we just started stepping away from the state standards. If that's just assumed, then it's not here, but it wasn't.
Yeah, Bruce, I think it's a perfect example. Because now we have 2 things that we have to actually look at. Because you just can't say that the state has come down with a new requirement. And so we have to put in this state, you know, as far as implement this new state standard, but never track how we're actually implementing it. Never track how is it going. The school can go back and say, yeah, we implemented it. But are our children learning from it? The state expects that they're going to learn from it. How are we doing that? What burden is being put on the teachers? What other things have to be? So if you're not tracking it any place, if you're gonna say, well, that's just state standard, that's a mandate, we have to do it. How are you actually how is our school actually tracking that?
I would suggest that our school is keeping track of how our students are doing by our assessments.
Okay.
So we use our FAST assessment at our elementary, and our elementary up through 8th grade.
Yep.
Our MCAs, we've had a lot of discussion about whether that is an accurate representation or not. But I would say that's a measure for us to be able to look at, is the teaching that we're doing aligned with the standards? And when it's not, and if it's not, then that's where our professional learning communities come in. You're gonna see that professional learning communities are in here as an implementation item or an action item, but it is specifically around develop professional learning communities targeting wellness pillars.
Mhm.
Okay, we don't have the wellness pillars yet. Okay, so that would be one of the things that is still not complete. Okay, that we need to bring forward and work on. So can I get back to just walking through
Yeah,
what has
please
been
do. Yeah,
happening? and what we have done so far.
I just make a suggestion. We as a school board really need to sit down and discuss this whole thing.
That's what we're doing right now. This is our opportunity to discuss it. So
No, I understand that. Please, let me finish, because I agree. Let's just step through this and figure out where we're at. But we really do need to figure out, okay, where are we at with this strategic plan? Where we're gonna go with it? Because if we need to take look at things, 2 different ways, as far as how we may want to track things. I never even thought about, state standards, and how you track that. Is that going to ever be part of this? I have no idea. But I think that if you have that, you're going to have to track it someplace. I think what you said, Janelle, is absolutely great. I mean, you could figure out where we're at by different state requirements as far as learning. But anyways, I just make a recommendation that sometime that we as a school board just have a whole meeting, we just sit down and talk about this.
But it's already in place. I don't know if we change things. He's explaining it today. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking at it. We were hoping when we did it, that it would be a live document, not sitting on the back shelf to bring up every once in a while to do whatever, change a date.
which
There's some
I felt like
old information.
I felt like since we've implemented this student plan, it has been a live document. It has been what has drove the focus of our administration and our staff as far as what decisions are we going to implement? What things, again, not state standard thing, but what is this an important thing? Is this softball field complex right now really fit into the plan for what we need to develop as a school district? Does this social emotional learning fit better into the plan? Is that better use of our time, effort, and money? That's what the strategic plan is for, not for changing of state requirements and legal wording and documents and everything else. That's just what the admin's, responsible for taking care of, because that's what the state requires. And that's our job as a school district, school board, to ensure that our administration is abiding by those state standards and abiding by those regulations and those laws. This here is strictly for us to have a guiding document, which I feel, since it was developed with Matt and all the way through Janelle, it's one of those sets where the goals are where they come back to and say, is this the idea that somebody has, does this fit into where we're trying to go, or what we're asking for the district to go to? Not just us, but the community and everybody else that's helped develop this.
And this for Paynesville.
And this is for Paynesville. This is for our,
This is what the state requires. This is what we want for our school. Right.
and every school district in the state understands and expects their administration and their staff are going to abide by the state of rules, regulations, laws that are set out there for school districts. If we can't trust in that at that point in time, then we're going to be in meetings for 3-4 hours every month forever talking about the stuff that we should just expect that she does and trust that she does so we can move forward.
Yeah, let's continue with them.
Yeah.
So a robust professional development activities for all school staff members to maximize their potential. So aligning staff development work and expectations to the strategic plan. So at the professional development committee, there have been a lot, to be completely frank and honest, a lot of our professional development has been centered around letters and the letters implementation. Some of the work that has come in has been also around the teacher licensure requirements that are part of the CEUs and making sure that our staff have what they need in order to be relicensed. This is something that we will continue to work on. You'll also see identify PD activities or PD events to promote learner empowerment. There hasn't been a lot of focus on learner empowerment and student choice in their learning. That hasn't been a big portion or a focus of our professional development to this point. The development of professional learning communities targeting wellness pillars. Well, you're going to see one of the areas is to determine wellness pillars. We don't have wellness pillars yet. So we can't really have professional development or professional learning communities around wellness pillars if the wellness pillars aren't developed, right? So we would have to come back and develop a wellness pillar. Reimagine educator growth that fosters creativity and critical thinking. So educator growth, fostering creativity and critical thinking, I would say, is partially implemented because we're really asking all of our elementary staff to focus on the science of reading. That has been a shift in the way in which they taught reading and English language arts, but is it system-wide? No, not yet. Okay. Develop local learning expectations that focus on areas of wellness for all learners. So this is where those wellness pillars would come in. We've not done that yet. We don't have, we have not created and implemented emotional and physical wellness standards, activities, and evaluation tools. That would be something that we would need to continue. Oh my goodness. Remind me later, please. Okay. Now is not the time to restart the computer. But in order to create and implement emotional and physical wellness standards, activities, and evaluation tools, that's one of those areas that we need to do through professional development focus. And our focus has really been on implementation of letters. So again, to kind of come back to one of the things that I heard Gerald kind of talk about is being responsive to what staff need. And you think if you think back to last year and this year, where our professional development calendars changed to not have such a rigorous focus on the implementation of letters because it was just too much for the staff. And in complete collaboration, that yes, that is absolutely true. The state of Minnesota said that was a really, really lofty goal. So it made sense that we refocused and we spread that out over 2 years for the last 4 units. But it does still take a lot of time and effort. Operationalize a 4-year plan at the secondary school and family groups at the elementary school. So one of the subgroups of that, so the family groups at the elementary school are rolling out. That is happening. A 4-year plan at the secondary school. So part of what has to happen there is to take a look at the different models and how those align with the pathways. You've heard David talk about the pathways last spring and how the high school is establishing different courses. So what would a 4-year plan look like for a student as they come in 9th grade through 12th grade? Looking at different models. So we had to have some of that pre-foundational work, those pathways discussions, what courses align where in order to start having those discussions, okay? Develop specific and intentional system-wide equitable learning targets that foster deeper learning. So create regular, established, scheduled capstone projects through the K-12 system. So a capstone project is something that's in alignment with the profile of a graduate. What are the things that you're doing, but you can't really have a capstone project if you don't have that profile of a graduate. So that you can say, here are the things that I've been doing in my pathway that are those cumulative large projects that demonstrate all the learning of the targets that we've established as a district that we wanted our students to have. So those things integrate together, okay? Establish grade band learning plans for students. So that's gonna also come with that finalization of those, of the pathways and how students can move between, move through the pathways. Develop and enhance curricular offerings and community partnerships that provide pathway programming, and then design a profile of a graduate. So I've talked about each of those a little bit. Intentionally develop relationships within our system and community that promote social, emotional, physical, and intellectual wellness. Expand upon partnerships and business with civic leaders. That's an area where we continue to do good work. So as a, for instance, we have students that are working through Lewis Industries through establishing apprenticeships. We have students that have, now this year we didn't have any, last year we did, work through the Cold Spring Granite program where they can take classes, they learn about the specific stuff, whether they're learning about welding in the classroom, they see it on the floor, and then they get to go out. So it's a very strategic partnership with our area businesses. So that's something that is ongoing. That is not something that will completely end because it's going to depend on whether or not a student is interested in an apprenticeship. or is interested in attending Cold Spring. So those are things that are not going to exactly end. Promote family involvement in various aspects of the school system. We've had a lot of conversation about different ways to re-engage families to get them back into the buildings. Some of the things that I think have gone really well at the elementary, there's been a transition to the 15-minute touch base at the start of the school year with every family as a pre-start of the school year conference. We have our open house at the secondary. We've been talking about how can we change our conference structure to re-engage families at the secondary, okay? Get them back in the buildings. An active, cohesive transition from elementary school to secondary school. That's been going really well, and that's happening. Our fifth graders come over to the sixth grade, and they do some. They have lunch here. They walk through and meet different teachers. Our eighth graders do an activity fair for ninth grade so that they can get more involved from an eighth grade to a ninth grade. So that's not on there, but it's something that's happening even within the secondary to really foster a very cohesive transition from at those natural points from elementary to secondary and then middle school to high school. Develop students and family-centered support service communication model. That's in the process. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely certain what the vision of the board was on that one. I don't know if somebody could feed that and give me a perspective of what that meant. That'd be great. Do I know that we continue to try to have family-centered conversations and support? Sure. I think when we get into our communication, I'll talk more specifically about how we're communicating with families. Okay. So when you look at what is the data that would be used to monitor that first goal using our Minnesota student survey data, using the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, the STAR diagnostic. We don't use STAR any further because we use FastBridge K-8, locally developed assessments. So that's if our teachers have formative assessments, or I'm sorry, pre-test and post-test to what they started teaching to what the student cumulatively knows at the end of their course. ACT data, PSAT data, and classroom grades. Our ACT participation is significantly down because it's not required for a lot of post-secondary institutions unless you're really looking at scholarship money. So our ACT participation is significantly down. The second goal was around communication, provide formal and informal communication channels, evaluate utilization of online platforms. So in the strategic plan tracker, I've had a report that shows how Matt Dickhausen was running, what our different kits were, and how that is, how community is interacting with Facebook, Instagram, our webpage, and things like that. Provide staff professional development regarding how to use each social network effectively. I'm not entirely certain if Colin did that prior to me coming on board or not. But many of our staff are utilizing Miranda to access their social networks. And if you take a look at, we're going to get down there, but it's establishing a communications point person, and that has been Miranda. So a lot of our staff are utilizing Miranda to get their platform activities out in social media. In-person and virtually accessible opportunities. I think when we can, we have families that are accessing virtual conferences if they can't be there. I think our staff have been very responsive to parent needs as they arise. District-wide digital tools. We've talked a lot about our technology levy and what that money is used for. And that's one of those areas where we have our subscriptions that are paid for out of our tech levy. And that was one of the things that when the conversation went to more of a digital curriculum writing, it was utilizing more of those digital tools. There's a wide worth of tools that are used, and I can pull up for you Colin's report that had how many apps were being used in the elementary classroom. So that's something that has been tracked and reported as well. Develop communication timelines, weekly, monthly, quarterly. So our principals do weekly communication with families. Our community ed does communication quarterly through the flyer that has in our so those are just some of the different types of communications. Most of our weekly communication happens through SMORE, which is the parent communication that goes out via email. And then our principals are able to see how often parents are interacting with their content to make sure that parents are getting the information as well. Utilize feedback surveys. We've talked a few different times about different surveys that have been done we did our student survey. We've done surveys to find out for calendar information. We've done surveys to find out about graduation. So there's been a variety of feedback surveys that have been done. Establish a communications /PR manager. It's not an official title per se, but Miranda does do all of our media communications through the district office. Ensure communication models, modes, links are readily available, quick links. When we find things, this is an area when Matt Dickhausen left, we had to, between Miranda, myself, Jonah, we were working on the website when things were not working, trying to make sure that those links were updated, and those would come across usually via an email that both Miranda and I get through just the district webpage. If something is broken, we usually get an email, and then we'll try to get that updated and fixed as quickly as possible. Evaluation of communication modes. So again, that's something that we've looked at ongoing to find out where is our communication coming from. We did do our survey and found out that there are people that get communication through email, through our webpage, through the newspaper, just really trying to make sure again that we have multiple forms of communication. So it's something that we need to continue to work on and continue to make sure that it is well-rounded. Obtain feedback regarding use from internal stakeholders. We've not surveyed staff recently about communication modes and where they're, that's certainly something that we can do here in the near future to understand what their our current internal stakeholders, what the best communication mode that they're finding. The baseline for the mode, in the strategic plan tracker, and I believe it was March of 22 that was identified as the baseline for like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and so on. Research current best practices. I would say that's ongoing. And then draft a proposal for future communication tools. I've not done anything in that capacity to make any further recommendations about communication tools. Okay. And then that final goal is about fiscal financial allocation and fiscal stewardship, recognizing that fiscal resources are finite. So implement appropriate fund balance expectations for the district, approve the district policy for a fund balance, which the board did prior to my arrival. Complete annual budgeting process and delivers a balanced budget in alignment with the strategic plan goals and objectives. Again, I think as Thomas kind of talked about, that's been something I think we've tried to work on, is make sure that as we're looking at any budget implications, we're also referencing the strategic plan. Develop and support practical practices that maximize school district revenue. The second component of that has been around equity issues within participation and activities. So I've talked quite a bit about how administratively we've talked and looked through our participation and any lack thereof due to finances, fees, and internally, we have the activities director traditionally in conjunction with anybody that would be identified as free and reduced. If there's just a observation that a student isn't participating, we know a family situation, those things are taken care of so that financial barriers are never the reason a student is not participating in an activity. Okay, those have been ongoing. So and then the data for, so the audit reports is going to be our fiscal accountability, our policy manual. We continue to review that multiple times throughout the year. Rick reported on our participation data in June, May, and then really, I think our activity fee models, I have multiple resources to look at from our surrounding communities. And as we continue to review that when we take a look at our fee structure. So that is also ongoing. So that's kind of where the strategic plan information is. In regards to the tracker, if it would be helpful, I could go through and put every activity on and identify where it is. If it would be in exploration and planning and implementation, I could certainly do that. So it would be every item is identified. But this tracker has been the movement. And again, it's not updated monthly. Some of these things, sometimes there's not change monthly. But there are times where we've brought an item from planning back to exploration because as in the planning process, we found maybe it wasn't going to work the way we expected it to work. So it went back into exploration. Okay. So those are the updates, or I guess just the bring to the table for discussion. If there's something different that you would like to see as a board in the way that strategic plan is documented, or if you, I do not want to delete anything from the plan, but I think we can make a notation of a change or a revision, and a color code or something like that.
Like that star thing that went to Fast Book 8.
Yep, and I can just
We're
make a
not using it
notation.
anymore.
Yep, I can make a notation.
So,
Yep.
to a degree, I don't agree that it's live, but I think the discussion is bigger and more analysis time. I think we bring it up again.
Okay, so what would
That's
you
what I
like?
don't know that we haven't changed anything. So we don't have to do anything here. We don't have to adopt anything. We have no resolution to decide on. Just leave it until we can kind of look at it.
That
I
can
think
be-
so. I agree.
Okay. All right. And Rick, moving on.
In next meeting, upcoming meeting. Said there was another one. I didn't have it on.
I bolded it, I bolded it on the agenda that I'm presenting from right now.
Oh.
So July 24th, the facilities committee is going to be meeting at 2. The subcommittee is meeting before then, but it's just one board member, so I didn't identify it as a formal committee.
Policy meeting next week.
Yep. The policy committee meeting is going to be relatively lengthy. There was a lot of information that came through legislation that MSBA is recommending we take a look at. So,
Okay, then we're at the point of closing the meeting for the evaluation of the superintendent.
Make the motion.
I'll second it.
So Thomas made the motion. Cheryl seconded. At 7:33, I got it right here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, close the meeting for purpose of evaluation.
hey, Rick.
Okay, do we have a motion then